There are a lot of stories out there that explore an idea commonly referred to as the cruel indifference of the universe versus the indomitable human spirit. Usually these stories end up having humanity win in the end, because we're humans, and we want a happy ending for ourselves. But what if there was literally nothing you could do? A threat so existential it would be pointless to even try and fight back. Z.A.T.O, I Love the World and Everything in It is a visual novel about just that, an utterly hopeless situation. But Z.A.T.O by no means is a doomer game. The story of Z.A.T.O is terrifying and heartbreaking, but also contains the most optimism I've ever seen in a piece of media. It asks us to face the absurdity, the unfairness of everything, and despite it all, love the world. The game's themes deeply resonated with me as it discussed not only very real things like friendship, social expectations, and mental illness, but also very abstract philosophical questions like, do we have free will? Or why do we exist? In this video, I'm going to do my best to try and discuss what Z.A.T.O presents to us, and unravel what I think the game is really trying to say. It won't be easy since the way it presents its ideas isn't exactly a straight line, unless you zoom out really far. We'll have to discuss everything from doomed Yuri to Jesus. But before I get too far into it, please take a moment to read the disclaimer. Z.A.T.O has a very simple premise. Find a missing girl in a small town. And yes, you do look for that missing girl, but rest assured that journey will spiral into so much more. To begin, let's get acquainted with our setting and characters. The story takes place in Vorkuta 5, a completely isolated and closed-off town in the USSR, also known as the Soviet Union. Some have speculated online that the name of the game, Z.A.T.O, refers to a Russian acronym that translates to Closed Administrative Territorial Formation. In other words, the existence of this town is a tightly regarded secret, and people do not enter or leave the town very often. The town also resides far north enough that it experiences polar night, meaning a period of time where the sun does not rise, even in the daytime. The sun is often seen as a symbol of prosperity and hope, and biologically speaking, exposure to sunlight produces serotonin, which helps us feel happier. Being stuck in a small town where the sun doesn't rise for an entire month probably sounds depressing. Most residents of Vorkuta 5 would agree with this, all except our main character, Asya Shubina. The single most defining trait of Asya is her optimism. The game begins with a monologue of Asya talking about how others say the sun is lazy since it doesn't rise for an entire month. She disagrees, stating how amazing it is that our sun and planet are so special, that they are just the right size and type to allow for sentient life, and how impossible it feels that all of these things could be a coincidence. She feels it is mean to say that the sun doesn't try its best. She also wonders if perhaps just like a kid gains consciousness and wants to be seen by their parents, the universe also wants to be seen and loved, so it created us. It created these perfect conditions for life so we could exist. However, her thoughts are interrupted by the teacher's announcement, snapping her back to reality. Alongside Asya's optimism, her other most defining trait is her thoughtfulness. She tends to overthink everything. From the way the world works to the tiniest social interaction, she philosophizes and justifies every little thing. This can also be seen in her interactions with the local bully, Vadim Garin. The teacher's announcement to the class is that a student, Ira Grachevskaya, is missing and tells the class to report any information they know to the office. In response, our bully, Garin, speaks up and mockingly states how worried about her the class is. Afterwards, he comes up to Asya to ask about Ira, stating that they were pretty close. When Asya tries to deny this, Vadim jokes he thought they were lesbians. His whole friend group proceeds to laugh at her. In her head, Asya thinks about how Ira has only been missing for a day, that she could be coming in any moment now, and hears footsteps, believing them to be hers. She hopes and hopes, then nothing, just her thoughts. In embarrassment, she opens the textbook and mindlessly flips through. She acknowledges that she needs to stop indulging delusions like that. After all, if Ira came through the door and beat them up, would it even help? She then concludes that it would have been a bad thing if Ira came through, so it's a good thing she didn't. This once again shows Asya's optimism. Even if she desperately wants something to be, in the end, she decides that it must have been a good thing it didn't go her way. From the sun not shining for a month to being bullied, everything is just the way it should be. Whether this is healthy or just a coping mechanism is a discussion for later. Asya's overthinking continues as she decides whether or not to go tell the teachers what she knows about the missing student, Ira. Eventually, she decides to do it, where she encounters another student, Marina, who is also there to tell the teacher something. And with this, our cast of characters is complete, save for two that don't appear until the final act of the game. Marina has already told the teachers what she knows, but strangely won't let Asya tell her story. Asya starts freaking out, blaming herself. "Ah, I just can't help it, can I? We've just met and I've already managed to mess everything up. Damn it." I point out this line in particular because it tells us a lot about the nature of Asya's optimism. She thinks everything works out for the best, unless she is the one who did it. Asya is incredibly insecure and uses a bright perspective to shield herself from feeling bad when things go wrong. Thankfully, this assumption that she did something wrong is just another one of Asya's delusions, and Marina is actually just a friend of Ira, and leads her away from the office to discuss in private. Before we get to see that conversation, a title screen flashes before us. Episode 1, Ira. Besides the short introduction to our characters and setting, Z.A.T.O is divided into 3 parts. The best way I can describe part 1 is the calm before the storm, with the focus being on the relationship between Asya and the missing girl, Ira. Its themes are very down-to-earth, relating to the difficulties of being different from others and not meeting social expectations. And if you stopped playing the game after episode 1, you might think Z.A.T.O is a love story. Well, actually it is, but just not in the traditional sense. But in any case, we begin episode 1 with a flashback of Ira, specifically of Ira throwing a chair at Vadim. This, of course, shocks the entire class, who usually just play along with Vadim's bullying. Ira threatens to kick Garen's face in if he reads Asya's notebook again, and storms out of the classroom. Afterwards, Asya's thoughts give us some context on Ira, how she's a rebel, and that's always causing trouble for her parents. She contrasts Ira to the closed-off nature of her town, stating that she's like a weed that's sprouted in a painstakingly maintained flower garden. She ends her thoughts by stating that it's not Ira or Garen's fault. It's actually her own fault for bringing the notebook, which is just more of that insecurity and self-blaming we saw earlier. Naturally, Asya wants to thank Ira, but with how elusive Ira is, it takes 2 weeks to happen, where Asya finds Ira in the bathroom smoking. She sits in the stall nervous and overthinks how to approach Ira. When she hears Ira start to leave, she swings open the door much to Ira's surprise. She eventually manages to apologize for getting Ira in trouble over some stupid poetry, to which Ira questions why she's apologizing. Ira gets frustrated and leaves, not before telling Asya her poetry isn't stupid. I think that for many, Asya's insecurities hit close to home. It can be hard to feel confident about the things we enjoy, especially if you have a bully like Vadim mocking you in front of the entire class. Ira may be rude and a rebel, but to Asya, she's a hero, someone who stood up for her. Asya might also feel a connection to her because even though Asya isn't a rebel in the traditional sense, she is definitely different from her classmates. Asya might relate to Ira more than anyone else in the class. A few weeks pass and Garen is again teasing her, this time over a drawing and the boy is hiding her notebook somewhere in the school. Her mind involuntarily drifts to Ira. She thinks about how much she wants to see her. She even thinks about changing her route home to bump into her. In another incident, the girls in the class convince Asya to let them put makeup on her. Of course, it's a prank and they made her look ridiculous. As per typical Asya reaction, instead of being angry or upset, she starts thinking about the nature of bullying, stating, "I really believe that if someone is doing something hurtful, they don't fully understand it, so I shouldn't wish bad things on people who don't know they're being mean." This highlights that another aspect of Asya's optimism is her forgiveness. Once again, this might be more to shield herself than for the sake of others. Asya would certainly agree, as throughout the story she expresses that she feels quite selfish. Whether or not this is justified is another conversation. To that end, Asya can only think about how greedy she is to keep wanting Ira to show up and save her again, that she should just be happy with all that she has. Thankfully, Ira appears to say what I think we are all thinking. Why do you always go along with some bullshit? Apparently, in yet another incident, Garin gave Asya a fake love letter. Ira offers to burn it, but Asya rejects the offer, stating that a fake confession is still a confession in the end. Those words didn't choose to be written insincerely. Here, Asya personifies words on a page. Along with her observation about the universe being cute, I would diagnose Asya with hyper-empathy, a trait common in individuals with autism, which I would absolutely say Asya has some form of. In the context of the existential horror stuff that happens later, I would even go as far to say that autism is her superpower. In any case, Asya thanks Ira. In response, Ira gets flustered, which Asya thinks is cute. This is probably not in the romantic way, but in the pet sort of way Asya looked at the universe earlier. When I talk more about the Yuri aspect of this game, I'll discuss this more in detail. Our next scene is when Asya's plan to find Ira somewhere in town succeeds. According to Ira, she's at the research institute because her mom works there, and she brings her lunch. Asya gets lost in thought about how kind and amazing she is while Ira goes inside. Back at school, her classmates discuss the idea of Ira getting expelled due to low attendance, which causes Ira to spiral a bit, stating things like, "This world is way too gentle. It's been too kind to an ungrateful brat like me." She then notices a bird flies past the window, which is a recurring motif we will discuss later. A little desperately, Asya finds Ira in the bathroom and expresses her concern about her getting expelled. Ira knows, but it's too late with only a month left. However, Ira says thanks to Asya for showing concern, which fries Asya's brain. She doesn't know. She thinks I'm doing this out of the kindness of my heart. It's just not fair. She really is too good of a person. Ira then helps Asya to find her diary that the boys hid. She has a bit of a heart-to-heart with Asya about not going along with the boys' bullying anymore, but it doesn't get very far. In the end, Ira asks Asya to write her a poem, stating that she liked her other ones. Ira and Asya have one more positive meeting at the library before things go downhill later. Ira was reading Angélique, a romance novel. Asya responds that she was reading The Plague by Camus, which is fitting since the themes of the book are very much present in Z.A.T.O. She also gets to tell Ira about other books she's read, to which she says, "I'm so happy that I might die." This makes a lot of sense since two of her main special interests are books and Ira. In their next meeting, things take a turn. Asya spots Ira between rows of garages, but instead of humoring Asya, she's exhausted, pissed off, and says, "God, can't I be alone for 5 minutes?" Asya walks away defeated. In her room, she sulks for a while before her optimism can finally prevail. She decides to work on her poem for Ira, thinking, maybe she'll smile, or what if she gets flustered? That would be so cute. I want to see her make that face again. However, this isn't a romance novel. Asya doesn't get to confess her love. In their final meeting, she finds Ira near the playground. She's a mess and crying. Asya tries to express concern, but once again, Ira pushes her away. "Go home, Asya. This isn't for you." Asya is too weak, both emotionally and physically, to stop her, and Ira stumbles away. This was the last time Asya sees Ira before she goes missing. Thus ends episode 1 and begins episode 2. Marina. If episode 1 was the calm before the storm, episode 2 is the storm arriving, but they don't know that yet. At the very least, Asya doesn't know that yet. Marina and Asya go to a cafe, where Marina recounts her last meeting with Ira. About half an hour after seeing Asya in the playground, Ira shows up at Marina's house, saying some very concerning things like, "I don't want to go," perhaps alluding to her getting kicked out of school. But then she says something much more concerning. "I can't even write anymore. I can't write anything," which is not something you say when you're just leaving town. This is the first clue we get about the supernatural element of the story. Ira is being affected by something very strong. Before leaving, Ira mentions that the weirdo, meaning Asya, saw her, and then she walks away, ending the flashback. On one hand, Ira calling Asya a weirdo could highlight the difference between how Ira sees Asya versus how Asya sees Ira. While on the other, one could dismiss this as not being too serious of a name to call someone who is obviously weird. It certainly is worth noting though for the sake of understanding their relationship. In any case, Marina tells Asya that they need to keep quiet about this for the sake of Ira's family. The people of Vorkuta 5 can't know Ira was going insane prior to her disappearance, because if they can't find her, that insanity will be her legacy. Asya chats with Marina a bit more before Garin appears to interrupt and do his typical teasing. Marina easily fends him off on behalf of Asya, as they actually know each other from playing together as kids. It is worth noting that while episode 1 depicts Garin in a very negative light, episode 2 is going to do a lot to save his character. I think Garin is one of the least understood characters, as I see a lot of people online hating him. I don't think it's fully justified. For now though, Garin is nothing but a stereotypical bully, and back at school, Asya wonders if she's really being bullied. After all, no one's physically hurting her or destroying her stuff. She wonders if it wouldn't be so bad to become friends with them. But something reminds her of the last time she went somewhere with them. Her optimistic mind tries to justify it. That was a prank. That time I overreacted. But this time, the rest of her mind wins out. You will overreact again. It will happen again. As a viewer, you might be concerned that Asya was SA'd, but I don't really think the story alludes to this incident being anything of that nature. Feel free to offer a different perspective in the comments if you think differently, but to my understanding it's just tried and true childhood bullying. After this round of overthinking, Asya sits in class and stares at the pattern of ice on the windows. She tries to see something important, some numbers, just like that time, alluding to the bullying incident. Then a bird flies past the window again. Math and numbers are quite prominent in the themes of the game, which makes me think of Milk Inside a Bag's focus on the null set. I don't know if it's just a coincidence, but something also makes me think math has a big influence on Russian culture, at least more than here in the States. If anyone watching is a native Russian, let me know. I'm curious. Anyhow, once classes are done, Asya goes looking for Marina, but accidentally finds her when she shouldn't have, and ends up eavesdropping on a conversation between Marina and Garin, who is super anxious about something, stating things like, "He's getting worse, you recovered. I know you're not the same, but you're functional." This is an important allusion to the existential activity coming soon, and is our first clue that Marina has the same condition that Ira went insane from. For now, I'm going to refer to the condition as the disease, perhaps as an allusion to Camus. This is also the game's first attempt to humanize Garin, to show that his actions, although not justified, are understandable. He's under a great deal of stress, dealing with something terrible. However, before Garin can open his heart too much, Asya slips and falls, alerting everyone that she was watching. Garin angrily grabs Asya, but Marina forces him to back off and drags them away. Asya and Marina go to a store and talk over some things. While doing so, Asya makes an observation about Marina's character. I look into her smile. It's lovely, but I'm not sure I see anything behind it. When the existential stuff goes down, this will make a lot more sense. As we learned from Ira's cry, the disease takes things from you, and we learned from Garin that Marina had it too. Personally, I think that Marina's story ends up being the saddest, and this fake smile is the first allusion to it. But perhaps like Asya would, I will try to put a positive spin on her character despite what happened to her. After making this observation, Asya follows up with some insecurity, and wonders when Marina will realize how much of a loser she is and get tired of her. She's thankful Marina is talking to her, but I still keep thinking about Ira all the time. It's only been 2 days since I last met her. Eventually, Asya remembers to ask Marina about a rumor she heard that Ira eloped with an older man. Thankfully, Marina reveals that the rumors are fake, and they are based on the fact that Ira was meeting with Marina's brother, Lev, who is a researcher at the facility. The reason why they were meeting was that so he could give Ira experimental pills to help manage the effects of the disease. Marina also shares more about the nature of the condition, that it isn't actually related at all to Ira's anger or rashness, but rather is a period of intense stress, basically a mental breakdown. A likely catalyst for her disappearance is that Ira stopped taking her pills about a month ago. Marina once again stresses the importance of not telling anyone. Asya makes a comment to her that, "You helped because you cared." Marina doesn't quite know how to respond, but accepts. This moment in particular is important to reading Marina's character. Although her smile has nothing behind it, she cares deeply about others. She feels a sense of right and wrong, and acts a certain way as a result. She is definitely still human, despite what she may have lost. Perhaps in response to Asya's comments, Marina talks about how nice Asya is. Asya just gives a thanks in response but doesn't believe it. Again, with the typical Asya behavior, this spawns more overthinking. But something is different this time. At this moment, the main character arc of Asya has begun. Asya starts thinking about how because the universe has been so kind to her, giving her Ira and everything else in life, she needs to give infinite gratitudes back to it, but cannot since she will eventually run out of time to be thankful. She then makes a breakthrough, realizing that perhaps instead of giving infinite gratitude, she will give one gratitude of infinite strength. Right now, my signals keep getting buried under the 10,000 kilometers of our planet's atmosphere. They're too weak. My signal isn't strong enough. The answer is right in front of me. Asya then looks crazily into the mirror. I am my own parabolic antenna. The strength of my signal is decided by my own level of gratitude. It's a matter of my resolve. It's a matter of admiration. I need to work hard so that I will feel so much more grateful. I need to overflow with love. If I fail to do that, my voice will never make it to the cosmos. And then, when I'm so overwhelmed with grace that I could die, I'll get up to the highest point atop the sea level that I'm able to reach. Then I will start my most powerful transmission to date. I will scream thank you and I love you so loud that all the people in the radius of 3,000 kilometers will feel it in their hearts and bones and muscles. She ends off with a promise. I'll love this world with everything I've got. It's not hard to think that Asya is a little manic after this. However, this is merely the beginning of how crazy Asya will become. If the main plotline of the game is attempting to find Ira, this begins the secondary plotline, Asya gathering strength. This is also the beginning of the other half of the discussion I mentioned, Asya as a pseudo-Christ figure. Asya is basically planning to gather up all the love in her heart and place it into one message of infinite power. As such begins Asya's great crusade of love. She travels the city and passes the car repair shop, which causes her to reflect upon the incident, how it was poor luck and her overreaction. And in order to gather her strength, she needs to love all of the city, not exclude one part of a joke gone wrong. Strangely, the shop is closed, so she looks at the hours to figure out why. Everything is normal until her eyes pass over it a second and third time. She begins to freak out, thinking it's a dream, and closes her eyes to try and wake up. When she opens them, she slowly reads it. Everything is normal until Sunday says in red letters, Tosya's face is, which causes Asya to scream out in terror. Her mind races for an explanation, and can only think it's Garin playing a prank on her. She desperately questions how he knows. When I looked in the mirror, I saw. And thus begins Jammed Signal C, which is the incident. A lot of the lines from the intro sequence to the game are present here. It smells of oil, a dark metal wall, a closed door. I've been banging against it, yelling all to no avail. My body is too soft. My words are too weak. My outline is too blurry. Of course I can't break through. Asya is stuck inside the car repair shop, presumably because the kids were playing a prank on her by locking her in. She desperately tries to get out, but can't. That is, until a voice reaches her, simply saying, "Get out," which causes her to realize that there's a window. She grabs a wrench and breaks it. A figure named Tosya is present, but before we can know more, Jammed Signal C ends. Although being locked inside a car repair shop might not seem so scary to the average viewer, it's important to remember that in the current story, Asya is 14, and this incident occurred several years prior. Asya was just a little kid, so it makes a lot of sense that something as unfamiliar as being locked inside a building with no lights on would cause her to freak out. Back at school the next day, Marina has a theory that Ira is at someone's place. They make plans to call about it later. After class, Asya pulls Vadim away from his friends to confront him about the prank, but he doesn't know anything about it. She doesn't buy it and asks him again, this time mentioning Tosya, but Vadim shrugs her off as just having had a crazy dream. Thankfully for Asya, this doesn't bother her as her mind begins crafting an elaborate justification for why he must have denied it. She comes to the realization, however incorrect, that perhaps he knew he went too far and is now trying to pretend like it didn't happen. She ends off this thought by thanking Garin. Although I could be reading too much into it, I think it's important that Garin walks away having only dismissed her idea. He didn't sit and laugh at the idea or make fun of her excessively in the moment. He hears her out and then walks away. There's a big difference between how Garin acts in public versus when he's out of sight from his friends. Garin maintains a persona and perhaps is not inherently mean as he appears. After school, before heading home, Asya must begin her work on her love crusade. She heads to the library and requests Angelique, the novel Ira read, but they didn't have it. Instead, she reads a children's book, Morozuko, also known as Father Frost, which is about a young girl who is sent to freeze to death by her evil stepmother. When Father Frost repeatedly asks if she's cold, she replies no, that she is comfortable. As a result of her politeness and kindness, he spares her and gives her riches to come home with. Asya comes to the conclusion that the book is about the will of the universe, and that yes, you may fear it. You can find yourself in a situation where any positive feeling towards it seems impossible, but you must gather all your strength and love it still. At home, Marina calls and gives more context on Ira's condition, describing it like falling into holes. The experimental medicine Ira took made the hole shallower, but stopping is like being dropped into a canyon. The worst part is that being stuck in the hole means that you deteriorate, since the brain isn't made to handle that sort of stress. You gradually lose what makes you human. Marina explains that Ira was likely beginning to fall into a very deep hole when they last saw her, which explains her comment to Marina that she can't even write anymore. She wasn't being figurative or dramatic, she was mentally deteriorating. Marina also has a theory that in such a state, the only place Ira could navigate to was home. Her parents may not have called off the search because they thought they would just wait for Ira to come down from what they thought must have looked like a drug overdose. Thus, they make a plan to go to Ira's apartment. As Asya and Marina meet to enact the plan, they get attacked by kids throwing snowballs. First, to Asya's surprise, Vadim appears and admits he bribed the kids to attack them. And then, to her horror, he says he's here because he's coming along. Marina promises that Garin won't do anything because he owes her. This is of course in reference to the secret conversation earlier, with Garin asking Marina for help. As they approach the apartment complex, Asya's obsession shows a little. This is the roof under which Ira grew up, slept, and dined. It almost fills me with a sense of reverence. When they arrive at the door, Marina reveals her plan is to ask Ira's mom for a book, and when she comes back unable to find it, use Vadim's strength to barge in to look for it themselves. As planned, Ira's mom answers the door and then goes to look for it. Marina and Vadim prepare themselves, but to their shock, when Ira's mom returns, there it is in her hands, a book titled On the Stability of Closed Systems. As Ira's mom shuts the door on them, Marina can only stare in shock. She searches her bag for the copy she brought, only to find that it's gone, and makes a cryptic comment, "So it worked." This is the game's first allusion to the disease's other side effect. At this point, we know it makes those affected lose their minds, but it will soon be revealed that the disease also makes one more aware of how the world functions, and as a result, allows them to tap into an ability to change it. The book may well have been in Marina's bag, but something altered the world, placing it in Ira's room instead. However, Marina just plays off this incident like she's just an airhead, apologizing to Ira and Garin. Now Marina's brilliant backup plan is to throw rocks at Ira's window to see if she comes out. The group ends up making a fun game of this plan, where the one who manages to hit Ira's window first gets a drink. In retrospect, this scene has me cursing out the author, as it ends up just being such a wholesome moment. For just a short while, these characters can just be kids, and not worry about Ira or the existential dread that looms over their shoulder. It makes their fate all the more crushing later. While Marina and Garin go at it in their competition, Asya thinks about the teddy bear on Ira's windowsill, and imagines Ira deliberating over the bear's name, which she deems super cute behavior. But Asya can't daydream about her love all day, as Marina and Garin accidentally end up breaking the window of the apartment below Ira's and need to run. It is worth noting here that this whole time, Garin doesn't really bully Asya at all. It almost feels like Asya is a part of a friend group with Garin and Marina. Although that could just be because Marina has Garin on a leash, I think it speaks further to the fact that Garin just puts on an act at school. He doesn't really hate Asya. He only wants to be popular in his friend group by being the jokester. As the group runs away, they enact one final plan, to climb up on top of another building and use binoculars to look into Ira's window. When they reach the top, Asya asks Vadim if this is the tallest building in town, to which he replies, that's actually the research center. Overall, this doesn't lead anywhere, as they don't see anyone but Ira's mom in the room. But for Asya, this moment was quite helpful, as she stores away the information Garin gave her for her love crusade. Somewhat defeated, they decide to make the best of the day by going to the movies to see an American film. There, they share a bottle of soda, and are having a great time until Asya realizes tears are running down her face. Out in the lobby, Marina comforts Asya, and in a moment of softness, Vadim offers Asya a drink, but she refuses. Asya admits that she was crying because she was thinking about Ira. Vadim tries to tell her it's not her fault, and she shouldn't beat herself up over it. Asya isn't listening though, and thinks about how she's a swine that wandered out of its pigsty to the grassland, reflecting that it's not a world that I was ever meant to see, I have to know my place. She then tells Garin, I don't know how I'm supposed to live anymore. This is a particularly human statement from Asya. Throughout the game, we have seen her optimism and love overpower seemingly all challenges. The thing it can't cope with is the emptiness Asya feels without Ira. After all, who could live without their love? But wait, is it love or just obsession? Garin grounds her. You didn't even know her that well. When Asya can't muster the strength to respond, he walks out, heading home. Marina apologizes to Asya for taking her out on this expedition. You're a very forgiving person, Asya. I should have known better. I'm too old to play pretend. They leave, and Asya can only wonder what Ira's favorite flavor of soda is. After this, we begin jammed signal B, which is from the perspective of Ira a few weeks prior to her disappearance. She is sitting in the cafe with Marina, who gives her a pill. They talk about the incident where Ira threw a chair at Garin for a bit, but then move on to talking about something else, which Ira doesn't care about. She ignores Marina and thinks, "Time hasn't felt right for a while. It's pointless. Everything's been pointless. I don't think I can do this anymore. No matter how much I chew, the cake doesn't taste like anything." Then jammed signal B ends. This scene is likely here to show Ira's thought process behind deciding to stop taking her pills. The deterioration already caused by her disease, plus the side effect of the pills, cause her to feel that fighting it isn't worth it. Next, we return to Asya's perspective for what I would like to call the big revelation in Asya's quest to transmit her love. This is the second of Asya's manic episodes where she realizes something about the universe. Imagine drawing a line. It doesn't have to be straight, because when you zoom out, it becomes straight. If the line looks crooked, it needs to be longer. The only line that does not become straight when zoomed out is one that is infinitely curved, a circle. The universe heals quickly. There is no knife. There is no cut. Your hands are clean. Everything in this world returns to absolute. This scene confused me when I first played the game, but looking back after everything, it is extremely important. In her first revelation, she realizes that she needs to love the universe, and learns from the children's story Father Frost that you need to love the universe despite how it treats you. Here, she realizes the reason why. Despite small imperfections, if you zoom out, the universe is perfect, and unable to be significantly affected by mankind, hence, the universe heals quickly. As a result of realizing everything is as it should be, she is able to love it more. But still, her signal isn't strong enough. There are two more pieces to her love that need to be resolved: Ira and the disease. For now though, she is back in class. Vadim comes and demands her homework, and much to her surprise, tells everyone about the fact she confronted him about the car prank. This shocks her, as just a day ago, he seemed concerned for her, and now he is back to mocking her in front of the class. She tries to fight back and withhold her homework, but they take it by force. She wishes for Ira, but stops herself, realizing that this change in Garin's behavior may coincide with her revelation about the straight line, that any imperfections in the universe will be combed back into place, starting with Garin. But she also notices that Garin's smile feels forced. She can't ignore the concern he had yesterday, and realizes that today he is merely an agent of the universe's will, and as a result, she can forgive him. With this, she notes her gratitude and love are growing stronger. Soon she will be able to spread the message. A bird flies past the window 3 times in a row. Asya's theory begins to work itself out, as soon Marina falls into place next. She finds Marina exhausted, who apologizes for being gross to Asya for stringing her along this entire time, and states that they don't have to talk anymore. Asya rejects this and says she wants to talk, but Marina doesn't believe her. Asya notes that Marina smiles in the same empty way she always does, but now her eyes are filled with a despair she couldn't fathom. Asya realizes that with Garin returning to his bully state and Marina not talking to her, all that is left is for Ira to fall into place in order for Asya to truly be alone again. She questions the universe's plan, wondering how Ira can fall into place when she's missing, and that even if Asya hits her head, she will still remember the kindness Ira showed her. At this moment, something snaps within Asya. She decides that her love for Ira must come before her love for the universe. My signal is weak, so you probably can't hear me very well. I'll have to deny you this once, okay? It's the one thing I won't concede, even to you. I have to be abnormal too, right? I'm part of the problem, aren't I? Do it, goddammit! She screams to the sky for the universe to strike her down for her disobedience, but it doesn't. Her signal only reaches halfway through the sky. At home, she calls Marina, but she doesn't pick up. Presumably, her brother does instead, telling Asya she's not feeling too well. We are soon entering the final stage of the story, but before, we have one last jammed signal. Signal A is again from the perspective of Ira, this time even further in the past, likely months ago since in this flashback it is spring or summer. She feels the ground beneath her feet, but still falls. You can't prevent a fall when there's no ground below you. What was the intended purpose? An impact? With what? An impact needs two objects. There are no two objects. Ira is in the middle of an episode, the ones that the disease brings upon. It seems she is in the process of realizing what Asya already knows, that the universe is one perfect object, and questioning how an object can collide with itself. But before her crisis can break her mind too much, a figure appears. Ira throws grass at it to keep it away, but accidentally throws it on herself, which sobers her up. The figure was Marina, and the place where Ira is right now are the garages. She goes here whenever she feels an episode coming on. This explains why earlier in episode 1, when Asya finds Ira near the garages, she becomes aggressive with Asya, forcing her away. Ira was probably in the process of having another episode then, and wanted to be away from Asya when it happened. Ira is confused why Marina is being nice and not looking down at her as she sits, covered in mud and grass in a dark garage. Doesn't she know that looking at someone so weak is meant to make her feel superior? But Marina doesn't, and tells Ira that she knows how to handle the episodes. It's easier to stabilize when you have someone near, so she grabs Ira. Ira tries to reject the help, but Marina persists. Thus ends jammed signal A. This signal reveals how Ira and Marina met, but also reveals a lot about Ira's character. She was alone and rebellious, partially due to her personality, but also probably because she was scared. She was scared to open up about her problems to anyone. She likely put on a tough and cold exterior to keep others at bay, which is why Asya confused her so much at the start. Asya, with her natural ability to see through people's facades, with her seeing through Marina's fake smile, was able to see the kindness in Ira's heart. Ira more than anyone needed people around her. It makes me wonder with how Marina explains touch can ground someone. If Ira had clung to Asya in that moment in the playground instead of pushing her away, would she have been able to save herself? We return to Asya apologizing to the universe, but also stating that she will not stop indulging in her delusions. She confronts Garian and asks for Marina's address. He states it won't help, and also admits that Marina was giving him those experimental pills for his brother and dad. At Marina's apartment, Asya wonders if the universe is really gonna let her do this. But to her surprise, Marina comes out. Marina laughs at a joke Asya tells, and Asya notes that she doesn't buy that this version of Marina is fake. When Asya offers to come in for tea, Marina suddenly starts coughing, and starts to close the door really quick, not before Asya can hear clinking in the back, meaning someone else is home as well. Asya fights, but is eventually forced out. This next scene is kinda hard to watch. Asya starts begging at the door, pouring her heart out, begging over and over for Marina to open up and let Asya be her friend. Asya leaves herself even more vulnerable than she usually is, putting it all out there. Thankfully, the door opens. Marina questions if Asya really thinks she's a nice person and really wants to be friends. When Asya confirms, Marina lets her in, and Asya notes she knows Ira is here. Walking down the hall, Ira sits at a table, clinking on a glass with a spoon. She clearly is not conscious, simply repeating her name in Morse code. Understandably, Asya doesn't want to leave Ira's side, but Marina convinces her to step aside to drink tea for just a moment. Marina finally reveals the nature of the disease. The illness that affects Marina and Ira can best be described as hypersensitivity to the universe's code. In essence, You can see every equation and algorithm that makes up the universe. Marina equates the feeling to having no skin on your soul, and being able to see the numbers that define each individual object. Although in the West we might think of this as being similar to the Matrix, I don't think this is about the universe being a simulation. I would think of it more in the abstract sense. For instance, if you threw a baseball, there are physics equations that define its movement. Imagine if we knew the equations that defined love as well. Much to Marina's surprise, Asya doesn't look weirded out or confused in the slightest. Asya simply states she just knows this. Of course, if Asya already had a realization that the universe was perfect, she might have already figured out that the universe acted with mathematical precision. Marina also reveals that the research facility, the reason this town exists in its isolated and secretive state, is studying the code. They wish to be able to harness the power to manipulate it, the power that Marina accidentally used to transport the book from her bag to Ira's room. Asya remarks how dumb that is, also having previously realized that the universe heals too quickly. Marina laughs and references the book she transported, saying that a closed system needs to maintain stability or else it falls apart. She tries to explain again to Asya that when you realize how everything's predetermined, how everything including you is nothing more than value strings, you start to lose your grip. But still, Asya is confused over Marina's feelings. Losing your humanity over it? What's wrong with humanity being defined by a string of numbers? What's wrong with existing within a perfect system? Rather than debate it, they head back to check on Ira. At last, Ira has been found, and Asya reaches out to touch her. These are her eyes, her lips, her skin, but Ira simply stares back blankly. Asya asks if she will get better. Marina says that even if she does, she won't be the same. I've changed. I've lost the part of the brain that makes you feel things. I pretend well. Asya simply says that she doesn't need to pretend, perhaps trying to allude that she already knew Marina's condition. We are getting quite close to episode 3 now, with the existential threat becoming clearer and clearer, and the effects are starting to be felt. Asya feels like she's forgetting something. Some words scroll by. If you forget, it probably didn't matter. If you forgot, it probably wasn't real. Asya wakes up to a scene of the three of them eating at the cafe. Asya, Marina, and Ira discuss romance novels. Asya remarks that romance can be cute, and that someone like a gracious elf might be her type. She also tells them that she finished another poem. This causes Asya to snap back to reality. It seems that this dream was her mind fighting for her to remember. Despite the universe working to comb the edges out, Asya has to win this fight. She looks Ira directly in the eyes. It was you. I wrote this poem to you, Ira. After reading it, the room goes silent. The tapping stops. Ira's eyes focus on Asya. Her head moves, a response to a signal that's coming from very far away. She holds Ira's hand, whose fingers are twitching. Then they stop. Asya can't hold back her excitement. Ira looks at me. She sees me. And that's all I've ever wanted. Thank you so much. Asya closes her eyes, and when they open, Ira is gone. We still have a little bit of episode 2 to go, but honestly, I would have ended it here. Ira is gone, and does not return for the rest of the story. Asya's primary goal of finding Ira has been completed, and even better, she was able to send a signal strong enough to reach Ira's soul, to bring her back from the canyon she was stuck in. When I first played the game, I was devastated. In a literal sense, we just saw Asya lose Ira right before her eyes. But I don't think that's what the game actually wants you to feel in the end. In my opinion, Ira was already dead the moment she began the spiral. Her soul was barely holding on, repeating her name, trying to live. Ira was likely scared, felt alone, and crazy. Asya reaching out her hand was not to bring her back to life, because that was impossible, but instead to help Ira pass on peacefully. She stopped clinking her name, and was able in her last moments of life, be able to just see Asya. They were able to say goodbye, and Ira could find peace. When she felt that peace, she stopped holding on and disappeared. This is the first person Asya, quote, saves, to my point earlier about Asya being a pseudo-Christ figure. Now that our plot line about Ira has been resolved, the secondary plot takes over. Asya's love no longer has to be divided between Ira and the universe, and she can focus it all into her transmission. We open to a questionnaire. The interviewer asks, "Any stuff you've been fixated on?" Asya responds, "Ira, sending my message to the universe. A love confession. I will confess my love to the world. I'm very close to achieving the right signal strength." It is revealed that the interviewer is Lev, Marina's brother. He states that Ira was assimilated. Asya gives her theory that it's because the universe is correcting course. Lev says she's right, but not because anything Asya or Ira did. He also explains that the pills everyone has been taking are a downer that dulls pattern recognition, allowing people to not be as affected by seeing the code. He hypothesizes Ira stopped taking the pills because she felt the code was telling the truth, and taking the pills felt like going blind. He notes that Asya seems to also have the code sensitivity, but is unaffected by it. This is what I mentioned earlier with Asya's superpower being autism. It seems that instead of going insane, Asya has just accepted the logicalness of the universe and loved it even more. Finally, he reveals the existential threat the town is under. The whole city is returning to null. It is undergoing correction, and within a week, all of the residents will be assimilated. Everyone will contract the code sensitivity disease and share Ira's fate of being absorbed into the universe. He offers pills to Asya to ease the symptoms. Asya maintains her position that dissipating into the greater world isn't all that bad, and takes the pills for her parents instead. Asya asks one final question to Marina. If all of this was inevitable, why did you try to keep Ira alive? Marina just responds, "Wouldn't you?" Asya agrees. This line is very important to the philosophical message of the game. It is very absurdist, that even if it was hopeless, it is human to try even still. And I think that the game doesn't think it was totally pointless. After all, if Marina didn't keep Ira alive, she never would have been able to see Asya one last time. For the final lines of episode 2, Asya realizes that what the universe was correcting all this time wasn't her getting friends. It was the research center. It all makes sense. Why would you ever go after individuals? For something to rouse you, it needed to be truly unforgivable. This city's not a pinprick. It's an open wound. Thank goodness it's healing. She wishes for the universe to wait just a bit. My words can't reach you yet. This existential threat actually reminds me, although this might be a little silly, the anime/manga Cells at Work. In that series, all of the cells of the human body are represented as people, and there's an episode about the cancer cell, which is a human cell that mutates and needs to be eliminated or else it will kill the body. In essence, the universe is a body, a closed system, and the town is like a cancer with its research. If it succeeds in manipulating the code, it could cause the universe to fall apart, so it needs to be eliminated. However, unlike in Cells at Work, our protagonists aren't the immune cells doing the eliminating. We are the cancer. That's the existential horror Z.A.T.O presents to us. With that, episode 2 ends, and begins episode 3, Asya. This episode begins with Asya thinking about good days, how you should remember each day is inherently good, It seems that in preparation for her transmission, she has dialed her optimism up to max. In class, the students echo the exact words Garin said to her earlier in the game. Noticeably, Garin isn't here. To my point earlier that the role Garin plays is simply a mask, in his absence, the other students fill the role of bully just as well. A bird flies past the window again and again. Here is a good time to discuss the bird motif. Birds are typically associated with freedom since they have the ability to fly. The birds flying past the window again and again as we get closer to the universe absorbing the town could represent their freedom getting restricted. As the space they are allowed to fly in gets smaller and smaller, perhaps the universe won't even allow a bird who lived in the town to escape. Alternatively, birds have long been used to symbolize messengers from heaven. The presence of birds could be the universe sending more divine messages to the town, or collecting the souls of the townspeople as they get assimilated. Meanwhile outside, Asya notices that the sky is off, that it shouldn't be this shade of blue, but it's still beautiful. Marina and Garin are there, but Marina is barely there at this point. She's quite dazed. Asya hands Garin her bottle of pills that Lev gave her, stating that her parents refused to take them. He immediately pops 2 of them, and then grabs the cigarette from Marina's mouth. He tries to feed her a pill, but she shakes her head and slaps his hand away. Asya looks distressed, and Marina moves in to hug her. Asya notes that there's nothing to the gesture, but that's okay. This is the last time we see Garin and Marina. Presumably, they soon get assimilated. Throughout this video, I've been doing some lawyer work trying to defend Garin's character, and here I think it's clear. With the end of their world in sight, Garin has forgotten all about the need to be popular amongst his friends. He shows his true colors by trying to help ease Marina's pain, despite the fact he has nothing to gain from doing it. He could have just downed all the pills himself, but he chose not to. I should mention, like I have in other videos, I am not really religious. It's just important to be able to recognize these literary elements. Earlier I discussed how I think Asya saved Ira, and I think Asya ends up acting semi-Christ-like here as well. A huge part of the Christian faith is forgiveness. A famous quote from Jesus is, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing," which sounds a lot like Asya's comment about bullying earlier. I really believe that if someone is doing something hurtful, they don't fully understand it, so I shouldn't wish bad things on people who don't know they're being mean. Asya has shown nothing but forgiveness to Garin throughout the story. She has believed in his inner good. In the end, he is able to be free from social expectations and show that side of him. In a sense, he is redeemed before death. Marina is the more complicated character. We find out that the disease took away her ability to feel emotions a long time ago. When I first played the game, I was devastated to see her as a shell of a human being by the end. But her slapping away Garin's hand is quite telling. By the end of the story, she has rejected the medicine she has been taking all this time. Although she may have lost some of her emotions, she has made a very human choice. Throughout the story, she helps Ira navigate her illness, she acts as a companion to Asya, and she keeps Garin in line. Even while she is on the brink of being erased, she hugs Asya, comforting her. Sometimes the most human thing you can do after being scarred is to use that experience to help others. When Asya finds out about Ira, she mentions to Marina that she doesn't need to pretend anymore. With the end in sight, Marina has helped all she can, and accepts Asya's words to stop pretending. She stops taking the medicine and lets go. She still hugs Asya out of instinct, but Asya accepts that there's nothing behind it. In a sense, the forgiveness Asya offers Marina for tricking the group into looking for Ira, and the actions Asya takes to heal Ira, save Marina by releasing her from her burden. For the first time in years, Asya has allowed Marina to rest. With that, there is only one day left. Most of the town is gone, including Asya's parents. Asya decides to open the New Year's present her parents got for her even though it's a few days early, since their gift will go unappreciated otherwise. A journal with the first page torn out and mittens. She writes and writes in it about how much she loves her parents, almost forgetting her own name as she signs off. Asya notes that the wound is closing. The world is healing. She walks outside and is shocked by a face she hasn't seen in a long time. Tosya, the girl who saved Asya in the car shop incident. As one might expect, they have a lot of catching up to do, and they discuss Asya's final mission, but Asya won't tell her about it fully, instead just telling her to follow her to the research center. Tosya apologizes for abandoning Asya for all these years, and how she has been worried. Asya responds that she fills the hole she left in her heart with wonderful things. Tosya asks if it has been filled. Asya responds that she doesn't need to now that she's back. This is the final nail in the coffin to definitely say that Asya's optimism was a coping mechanism. It sounds like it really started when Tosya and Asya were separated. When they arrive at the research center, all the locks are open. Tosya asks Asya if she has any hate for the research center, since they're the reason they got split up 3 years ago. The fact I didn't exist didn't sit well with them. Your ability, willing things into existence. You had the ability to cause big distortions. Asya, as usual, is forgiving, and feels that they let her go because everyone can do it. Here, we find out that Tosya is a distortion, a fake person, created by Asya just as Marina moved the book. Asya's code manipulation must be quite strong, as moving a book would presumably be much easier than creating a person. The research facility must have done something to quarantine Tosya's existence, but now that the universe is resetting the town, she has been freed. Tosya was created by Asya's call for help when she was locked in the car repair shop, hence why Asya remembers seeing lots of numbers then, since she was subconsciously accessing the code. Next, Tosya discusses the nature of the research facility. I hate being associated with the distortions here. They're nothing like me. They're too calculated. I was born from a wish made in earnest. What they're doing here is an insult to everyone's hopes and prayers. The great distortion, irregularity, whatever you call it, it's not a sin in itself. The cynicism behind it is. Asya makes a comment to herself about the universe. I thought I couldn't fall any deeper in love, but here I am. So it turns out you're quite the romantic. This is of course Asya's way of agreeing with Tosya's sentiment. By this point, Asya has forgotten the name of the city, and the snow has begun falling upwards. They climb up and up the radio tower positioned atop the research facility. She gets tired, but continues to climb still. Tosya notes that Asya has changed, perhaps alluding to the fact that Asya's quest to find Ira and her experience with Garin and Marina has strengthened her. At the top, her memory can barely hold on. Even their names are gone. The sun begins to rise for the first time in a month. Asya can only remember one thing, that she has a transmission to make. The girl across from her, who now looks a lot like herself, asks, for who? Asya has only one reasonable answer. Well, you, of course. We fade to black. An intelligence debrief notes that all connection to Vorkuta 5 was lost, and when military officials investigated, all life was gone from the city. A radio transmission from the town's communication tower that had been continuously broadcasting was at last disabled. The purpose of the broadcast unknown, but in a nearby town, we get the perspective of 2 students listening in on the radio deciphering Morse code. Repeated over and over is a single message. I love you. For many, the end of the game is perhaps the most confusing part. Tosya's appearance is somewhat sudden, and her purpose is strange, especially with how Tosya morphs into Asya near the end. But I believe that the end of the game is actually quite simple. I believe that Tosya is not just Asya's imaginary friend. The author of the game has confirmed that Tosya takes on the appearance of Ira, Marina, and Garin, prior to taking on Asya's appearance. It is my belief that Tosya is Asya's personification of the universe itself. As the universe assimilates Asya's three friends, Tosya takes on their appearance. And as the universe begins to at last assimilate Asya, it becomes more and more like her. Throughout the game, Asya's mission has been to send a message of love to the universe. In the end, it was right in front of her. At the very start of the game, Asya theorizes that the universe created sentient life to be seen and loved. And so, it appears before its most loving creation and is loved. Asya lives the longest out of everyone in the city because the universe wanted to personally see her off and hear her message. Having now finished the story, there are a few major themes left to discuss. We've talked about most of the characters. The last one we need to discuss is Asya, and by extension, her relationship with Ira. Then I'll end off the video by discussing the philosophical takeaways of the game. At points, I felt like not including this section because it's besides the main point of the game, but in the end, I decided that I should address it for the sake of literary analysis. The elephant in the room for this section is, are Asya's feelings towards Ira love or obsession? The bad news for the Yuri fans is that the creator of the game has drawn this image of the kids grown up had they not been erased, where Asya and Ira are not together. Neither are Marina and Vadim if you were thinking that. Asya is forever single, and Ira is a divorcee. However, this doesn't necessarily rule it out entirely. In recent years, especially in the West, LGBTQ relationships have become somewhat normalized, but it wasn't long ago that nearly everywhere, such relationships were looked down upon if not illegal. As a result, queer media has historically focused on one theme above all: yearning for the impossible. Whether the author intended it or not, Asya's intense longing to be at Ira's side, despite the fact that Ira is a rebel, not accepted in society, despite the universe's will to erase Ira from existence, is about as queer-coded as media can get without explicitly saying, "I'm gay." If you buy into this perspective, you could say Asya's yearning was strong enough to bring Ira back from the brink of death to look into each other's eyes one last time. And now, some of you might be saying, none of Asya's feelings are sexual in nature, which I agree, and I don't think they have to be. First of all, these are 14-year-olds. Second of all, love isn't inherently tied to sex. Whether Asya's feelings for Ira were genuine love or just obsession to the extreme, it is undeniable that Asya wanted nothing more than to be at her side. Although, I must say that we can't really speculate how Ira feels about Asya quite as easily. Perhaps the future envisioned simply speaks to the one-sidedness of Asya's obsession, or perhaps it alludes to the fact that Russia especially, even to this day, is not well known for treating queer people with dignity. The future where they are not together may simply be a harsh reality. Nothing says historical queer more than being forever single or unhappily married because love was never an option for you. Or they could just be friends, who knows. The last subject I want to address is Asya's optimism and the philosophical takeaway of the game. I already mentioned that it is clear that Asya's optimism is a coping mechanism, at first for losing Tosya and then for the difficulties of day-to-day life. But is that necessarily a bad thing? It makes me think of a scene from the movie Everything Everywhere All at Once, where Waymond tells his wife, who has been looking down on him the entire movie for his unseriousness, that his optimism isn't because he's stupid or childish, and is instead a strategic and necessary choice. In an absurd world, what else can we do? Z.A.T.O is a game about the nature of life, the cruelty of life contrasted with the love Asya has for it. If you zoom out really far on your own life, you will experience the same things Asya does, the pain and misery of losing everyone, and eventually dying yourself. You may be hurt by traumatic experiences like Marina. You may hurt others to fit in better like Garin. You might have to even be Ira, cared for by your loved ones as you wither away from disease. In the end, we all get absorbed back into the universe, but still, the journey there, the moments of joy between Ira and Asya, the friendship of Marina, the presence of Garin, make it all worth it. Even in the moments before death, Asya and Ira are able to cherish their connection. It's the bullying, the bad moments, but also the buying sweets, getting gifts, that make the world so worth it. Asya loses Ira, she loses her parents, she loses her friends. In the end, Asya even forgets who she is, but that doesn't change how she feels. It may be predetermined, it may all be code, but that doesn't mean we can't be happy. We can be anti-fatalist, not because the belief that the universe is predetermined is inherently wrong, but rather because it isn't helpful. The struggle, although it ends in erasure all the same, means something. Help others. Express yourself. And most importantly of all, love the world. Hi everyone, it's been a while since I've done a video longer than 20 minutes, but I figured I owed it to you guys since I had been gone for a while. If you liked this video, please make sure to like and subscribe, and if you really like what I do, I have a Patreon and Ko-Fi where you can support me. Sincerely, thank you to all my patrons and Ko-Fi donors for supporting me through these tough times. I wouldn't have made it without you guys. I hope you liked the video, and I'll see you next time.